Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, bringing you another amazing guest. He's from the United Kingdom. His name is Trevor Lee. He owns a company called Trevor Lee Media. And we're going to talk a lot today specifically about presentation. Now, sales presentations, you can call them those, pitch presentations, just conversations are actually presentations. So we're going to talk about what you do to make those better, because let's face it, we are dealing with human beings. And if we learn how to converse and we learn how to sell, but not being sleazy, if you will, playing win-win, then you have a much better outcome. And there's some rules to this process. And we're going to talk about those rules as well as we go along. So without further ado, let's go talk to Trevor right now. Trevor, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Doug, it's a pleasure to be here. And I can't believe it's nearly 2 years since you were on my podcast. How about that?
No, time goes by so fast now. It's crazy. Somebody told me when you start to get a little older, right, it would go faster. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I was in my 20s or whatever. Then they said, well, when you have children, it'll go by blindingly fast. And I was like, yeah, whatever, right? And here I am. They were right.
Great stuff. Great stuff.
So 2 years is kind of, it sounds like a long time, but it's like yesterday we got together almost in some regards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does feel like that. Yeah.
So thanks for being here. I really wanted to bring you here because a lot of people, they really don't know about how to do really we'll call it a sales pitch presentation, right? So it's kind of like they do all the work, they get them there, and then they blow it out in the conversation of the presentation and nobody buys. And they're like, what happened? Right. So I know you're an expert in this field, and we had a lot of people who are like, I wish I had something on sales presentations. So I'm grateful you're here. So thank you. Let's dive right in. How would you classify a sales presentation or a sales pitch presentation? Like, can you give a kind of a definition for it to set the frame?
Yeah, I guess so, Doug. I mean, I think a lot of people think that when you're talking about a presentation in particular, you're talking about a conference, an event, a big audience. But I think you're actually presenting most of the time, particularly in the sales environment, whether it's one-to-one, over Zoom or like we're doing now, or face-to-face. So I think, for me, a sales pitch or a presentation is defined as something where you're seeking a favorable outcome for you and the people you're pitching to.
So it's not like I'm going to get up on stage all the time, or I'm going to have my PowerPoint with me all the time. A presentation could be something like we're doing right now, just conversing back and forth, correct?
Absolutely. I think it's really any sales interaction where you've got a definite purpose.
I like that, definite purpose. So let's go there for a second, because I don't think even people think about this definite purpose as much as they should. I think what they're thinking is, oh, I got to make a sale, man. That's, I got my manager on my back, or I got my owner, or I am the owner and I'm responsible for converting revenue in, or whatever it might be. Right. And maybe they just want to make more money, but they come in with this frame, this intention of, I'm going to close this sale. And Trevor, it drives me crazy when sales trainers go, ABC, always be closing. Okay. It's like, what if it's not the right thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't really see that as I like always be building a relationship to a close. That's fine. What would be the first step? Somebody's like, okay, I got it. It's not PowerPoint. It's not necessarily over Zoom. It's not necessarily on stage. It's every interaction I have basically is a sales presentation in this process. What are kind of some of the points that they should be looking at to get going and do this the right way?
Well, I think there's a couple there, Doug. And I think you highlighted the one when you said, maybe this isn't for them anyway. Because, realistically, with today's research opportunities, you shouldn't really be making too many pitches or presentations which end in that scenario. Because clearly, if you do that, you've misread the situation, or you've got the research wrong, or something's not happened correctly in that process. Because you're wasting your time. Then you're wasting the audience, your client's time as well.
Right.
But I think if you get past that bit, then to me, the first thing is the purpose. Is to just write it down. But what I mean by that is, essentially, what do you want the outcome to be? That is the key thing. Why are you doing this pitch or presentation in the first place? And it's easy to say, well, I'm doing it because I want to get a sale, or I want to get a new customer, or I want to double the income from the current customer, whatever it might be, or I want to get some investment, however. But I think when you're identifying that purpose, you've also got to have a touch of realism in there. If you're going in to do a pitch and you're looking for $1 million or something, sale, then is it realistic? Someone at the end of that pitch is going to say, oh yeah, great. Here's the $1 million. Let's crack on. Right. So you've got to be realistic about what you want to achieve at the end of that pitch or presentation. And I think a lot of people miss that. If I'm at an event or something and somebody does a presentation and they kind of know who I am, sometimes they'll say to me, how do you think it went? Tell me what you thought of my presentation. And the first thing I say is, well, so what was your purpose? And they kind of look at me as though I've asked a completely ridiculous question. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, what did you want to achieve? And did you achieve it? And most of the time, they haven't really given that proper thought.
I've noticed that as well. In the people that I've looked at is companies or whatever, you go in and you go, what's the purpose of you selling here? And they all go to sell more.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I never thought it through, right? But not every interaction or every conversation, every presentation that we're doing, and it is a presentation no matter what we think,
Yeah.
Now, we get this kind of in dating, right? We say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to impress this person to get a date. And in the conversation, then I get a date, and now I put on my best shirt. I shave, I shower, whatever. I'm going to present myself in the best light because I want to now see if it goes to the next step, which is the purpose in that relationship potential, right? Now, whatever that next step might be, I don't know. That's going to be defined as well. But the point being is we do these things in human interaction all the way, regularly, but when it comes to sales, it's kind of like, okay, I've got my suit, my tie in the old days, right? Or it's like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to wow them and I'm going to walk out with the paperwork and that's going to be the deal. And there's nothing wrong with walking out with the paperwork if it's the right thing. But I know from personal experience, there are no bad clients. There are no bad customers. There are only bad business decisions to take that sale in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that initial process is what I call expectation. So if I'm working with somebody on this, I would say to them, okay, so when you're going to do your pitch or your presentation, whatever you want to call it, the person you're doing it to, or the team you're doing it to, or the company you're doing it to, what are they expecting to happen?
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't give that any thought at all either. And I think it's really important that there's this setting of expectation. So, Doug, I'm going to come. I'd like to come along and pitch to you. But what I want to do is I want to get to the point where you think it's a good idea to have a next meeting. So you know what the expectation is. I know what it is. I've told you what I'm planning to try and get to as an outcome. And then during the pitch or presentation, I want to steer you towards it. Now, if you say to me at some point, hey, I don't need another meeting, Trevor, it's great, let's go ahead.
Right.
Then fantastic. But if I go in thinking I'm just going to, get you to sign on the dotted line, and you're thinking this is just an introductory pitch or presentation to give me a feel for you, then our expectations are wide apart.
Right.
And therefore, that's where it's going to break down, because you're sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, he's trying to sell me something. I didn't expect that. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, there's no chance he's going to buy anything from me.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think sometimes we don't somehow have those conversations prior to the pitch or presentation, particularly if it's a big pitch or presentation. I mean, we might be pitching with 3 or 4 other companies for a big contract or something, and we might have received a document saying this is, the expectation, and that's great. But you've got, again, one of the downfalls there is that people don't read between the lines. They just scan the read. And again, they're kind of thinking, oh, they just want to buy. Mm-hmm. And they don't literally look at what's in the detail. And then they deliver the pitch or presentation and wonder why it doesn't work out.
Yeah. So even looking through the detail, if they have curiosity of like, this doesn't seem this way, right? What I found is, and maybe you have as well, is they don't ask. People, so my grandmother was really a cool lady, right? And she would say things like, if you want to know what a girl wants, ask her.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the 2 core things, or the key things when you're doing a pitch or a presentation, are listening and watching. And what most people, when they get up there to deliver a presentation, think it's all about talking and pressing the clicker.
Yeah, I've actually found asking questions is far more important than actually presenting, because if you have a slide, let's say in that case, right, we put a slide up and we ask a question of them, then we're engaging them and we're getting feedback, and they may go, don't like it. But if we don't know that, we go on to the next slide and we haven't addressed that. So now we've got an objection that's going to just pop up at the end anyways in some other capacity. So if we ask up front, like, does this make sense? Yes. Great. Any questions, comments, considerations? No. Sounds good. Great. Next. Right. And we just kind of move on. It never ceases to amaze me, Trevor, that people, they prospect somebody for, I don't know, a year, right? It takes them a year to get an appointment. And then they don't do the research and find out what the client wants, creates this, boilerplate presentation that's been going on for, 12 years. And they bring it in and they just, and they go and do their stuff. And it's like, no, I was not looking for Windows. I was looking for Microsoft Windows, they don't want building Windows. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh. So we're speaking with Mr. Trevor Lee. Trevor owns a company called Trevor Lee Media. You can find them at trevorleemedia.co.uk. They're experts on sales pitch presentations. Trevor, I know you have like points, like you give people points, like 7 points, 8 points, whatever, right? What's point number 1?
Well, the model I think you're referring to, Doug, is the kind of 7 P's of presenting model. There's the 7 P's, and that does revolve around purpose. I think the second thing is around people, and we've touched on that as well. Because again, I think you'll notice that I haven't mentioned slides or PowerPoint yet, and that comes later. But again, I think understanding who your audience is really important. It's very simple, isn't it? You just say, as you say, ask. So who's going to be there? When I turn up to do my pitch or presentation, whether it's face-to-face or online, who's going to be there? And then you can find those people. You don't have to be sent their biographies. You can find them. But again, it's just understanding who you're going to be presenting to, and understanding and finding out their expectation, as you say, because I'm sure you know that, in sales, I think the biggest problem we have in sales is assumption. We assume that we know what the client is looking for. And as you quite rightly said in your example just now about Windows, we often get that wrong.
Right.
And if we get it, if we've worked really hard for a year, to get in there and do that pitch or presentation, then surely it's got to be worth the time and effort to get the preparation right.
Yeah, I agree with you. This assumption thing, oh my gosh, I have seen this happen See, there's something, right? What is it called? Buyer's bias, right? So we all tend to sell to people the way we want to be sold to.
Mm.
And I'll never forget, there was a real estate agent. They had a little over $4 million home that the husband and wife are going back and forth. The wife's like, "Hun, I love this house. I want this house. Like, look at this, you know?" And he's like, "It's a little more than I want to go," right? And she's like, "Well, but look at the pool out here. The kids could be out here." I mean, she's selling him every single way on buying this house. Look at this bedroom. Look at that. Look at this, right? And he's going, "Yeah, that's pretty. I like it and all. It's a really important decision." And she's like, "But look at the neighbors and look at the schools that the kids are going to go to and this and that and blah, blah, blah." And she's just so pro on the house. And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know. I might want to just think about it a little bit." The real estate agent says, "This is a really important decision. I agree with you. You should probably take 48 hours and think this through to make sure you actually want this home." In the meantime, in those 48 hours, the real estate agent had called back. And the people went and bought a home for 4.6 million versus 4.2 million in the same neighborhood.
Right.
Right. So in that case, they would have invested in the house. Now, there could be an argument made that, well, they got a better house. Well, how do we know, right? They might have got a worse house for 4.6 million. Point being is the real estate agent's buyer's bias assumed that person would then think like them and she would want time. So she gave them time and she lost, a sale. I mean, even if she got 2% commission on $4 million, that's a pretty good payday to sell a house. So I agree 100%. This assumption thing, and Trevor, first rule in marketing really is research your audience, figure out who's actually buying, what they want to buy, and how they want to buy. So like, it should be no different than anything else that we're doing in life for communicating on sales.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if I could, if there's two things that I think businesses, anybody listening to this could do better when they're delivering their next pitch or presentation, it's prepare better and actually run through it, practice it a bit. Because if it's worth that much to you, it's got to be worth a bit of practice rather than just turning up. Because when you practice, it gives you an idea how the flow is going to work. Right. You can sense check whether you've got your purpose right. You get more, if you're feeling, not everybody's very confident about delivering presentations. Some people are too confident. And if you practice, it will make it all feel better in terms of the flow you've got. Have you included the right content? Have you got too much in there? Because I think one of the challenges that lots of people in business face is they're not very good when they're putting that pitch or presentation together, particularly if they're going to, support it with some slides because they're doing it to a number of people. Yep. They're just not very good, Doug, at leaving stuff out, being what I call that ruthless editor. Why am I putting that in there? Because, I think it'd be nice to have. I want to tell them how great I am at whatever. But more often, they don't need to know that. They already know that. That's why they've invited you around. So, again, I think it frustrates me when I see, people waste a picture or presentation because they clearly haven't really thought it through well enough.
Right. Do you think that's because they don't have the end in mind?
I think it might be. Yeah. And I think what you said about, you spend a year getting the pitch and then what do? You roll out the presentation that you've been using for the last 12.
I've seen people do that in the tech business. The technology's not even the same.
Crikey.
It's crazy.
Well, that is kind of inexcusable, isn't it? You can say, hey, well, I really like this idea, I'd like to buy, I'd like that technology because I thought that was obsolete now, but clearly it's back on your agenda. So, let's have some of that in our company.
No, I swear dial-up and DSL still exists. Like, oh my gosh, stop. So, and I would think, you said something I think that a lot of people, it might like go right over because it's just sounded so natural to you. But when somebody's too confident in a presentation, then they tend to miss the obvious. That's what I find, right? So what do you find when somebody's too confident in a presentation?
Well, I think you're right. And, this podcast of yours is called CEO Sales Strategies. And what I often find, it's the kind of CEO level, Doug, no disrespect to them, because I know they're listening to this out there on your podcast, but they're the ones who think, oh, I've done this pitch or presentation. I'm very confident about pitching or presenting. I know how to do this. I don't need any help. I guess I'm great at this, And they're the ones that sometimes get it badly wrong because they are overconfident. They think they don't need to prepare. They think they definitely don't need to practice. And actually, they're not that good. Some of them are great. Some of them are really good, but a lot of them aren't great. And they think they are. And that, to me, is that kind of overconfidence thing. It almost comes with the territory. I'm the CEO. I must know what I'm doing.
Right. I was just on a couple. So years ago, I'll tell two stories here. Years ago, I was with someone who was a world famous trainer. And I'm not going to say the name because I like this person very much. But I had a pre-call with somebody because I worked for these people as an independent running their teams. And I had a pre-call with somebody and they wanted to talk with this person. So I queued up the call. This happened twice, actually. So I queued up the calls. They get off this call and I call them back and I go, how did it go? And they go, what? Oh, what happened? Right? It's like, it was like, and so they tell me, they're like, look, the guy told me I don't qualify, right? That I'm not big enough. And and I said, what are you talking about? It's like, you make $10 million a year, right? And they're netting out a very healthy profit on that. It was that overconfident thing that they completely missed. They never even asked them what they were making. They just assumed by the size of the employee count in the company, because they only had a few employees doing $10 million a year, right? So that was one area of overconfidence. The next area of overconfidence was with a company called Intuit. So I queued up a company called Intuit for the same person. They went in and the person was like, all they did was talk about themselves for 45 minutes. And so I then asked the buyer, I said, well, is this something you still want to do? They go, yeah, but not with them. Right. And so I actually had to go back and close that deal. Now, the fun part about that was $435,000, Trevor, that deal to these people. Right. Now, that may not sound like a lot to somebody who's selling $20 million items, but the reality is this was a consulting package. So it's high profit, right? So that overconfidence thing, really, I see bite people all the time. And I always feel, now, please tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. I always feel like if I go out on stage or I go out to present in any capacity, I always have a few little butterflies in my stomach. And if I don't have them, I try to get myself to that place where I have a few butterflies. I ask these questions like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about that? And I'm like, oh, I don't know that. So I got to go research it, right? Is that the right way of doing it or the wrong way of doing it?
No, I think we know, Doug, that lots of people are nervous of presenting and they don't like the idea of public speaking and standing up in front of people, and they get themselves in a bit of a state. There's various ways you can deal with that. But in answer to your question, yes, I think it is good. I always say that about, if I do stuff, if I'm speaking or anything like that, I always say, I just want a little bit of an edge because it sharpens me up. It gets me focused. I'm ready to deliver whatever I'm delivering. And if I just rock up and I'm, just lobbing along because I'm not feeling any sort of sense of nerves or anything like that, there's a danger. I'm not really, right up at the highest energy level I want to be. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's good. Well, not a good idea. I think it's good that you've got that little edge, that little bit of nerves. Definitely.
Makes a lot of sense. We're speaking with Mr. Trevor Lee. Trevor owns a company called Trevor Lee Media. That you can get him at Trevor, Tervor, Lee, Lee, Media, media.co.uk. And we're speaking about preparation and delivering of sales presentations. And I love what you just said, that, keep this a little bit of, I would call it a little bit of tension in the process, right? Keep a little bit of tension. And the guy I've seen do this, or the person I've seen do this the best ever, and people might be surprised by this, is Mr. Tony Robbins.
Okay.
So Tony goes through I've seen it. I assume he still does. And if you don't, Tony, I apologize. But he will go through an actual process before he goes out on stage, right? And he gets himself ready and he gets himself in a peak state. And just like he teaches, right? To get himself in a peak state, right? And he goes out and he delivers and he kills it every single time. People love him out on stage. So if no one actually feels that they should be doing this, you take a look at a guy who owns billions of dollars worth of companies doing this successfully through the years. You'll see professional athletes do this.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. We'll see anybody who's a true champion of what they do traditionally will do this type of thing. That's what I have found, Trevor. You look at even musicians, right? I mean, I saw Billy Joel, 5 years ago, whatever it was, 6 years ago. The guy came out like his first time he's ever been on stage. And the audience just reacted to him so amazingly well. So, but here's the thing. Elton John came out on stage and he was kind of tired and just, I don't know if he wasn't feeling well or whatever. But the moment Billy Joel walked out, the whole place lit up. And I was like, what, are they all here to see Billy Joel? But then it kind of kicked into me. So this feeling like you're doing it for the first time is a really important point. I believe it also gives us vulnerability to make and ask questions. Have you found the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. And, going back to what you said about, I'm involved in a lot of sport and warming up is a big part of it. So we're going out there to deliver our pitch or presentation. And when I'm working with people, I say, do a warm up. I don't say go and run around the block 10 times, but literally, do a few, just do a few stretches, of the shoulders and a few deep breaths and just get yourself in the kind of zone. Yeah. And I think then when you do go out there, you are highly energized. You are ready to make an impact because as we know, as you experienced with Billy Joel, you have to get that engagement virtually straight away. Either through your body language or what you say or your first slide, whatever it might be.
Right. Now, all right. So that's like, hey, Billy Joel, Tony Robbins, they're going on big audiences. But on small, like one-on-one, the rules don't change, correct? I mean, you want to get yourself into peak state, right? And just get yourself a little bit vulnerable. And
I think so. I mean, one-to-one, it's probably a little less formal. You're probably not going to, march into the room, are you? And all that stuff. But nevertheless, again, I honestly think that delivering a presentation to a smaller audience is much harder than a bigger audience. And now not everybody would agree with me because they go, oh my God, if there's 100 people there, Trevor, I'd be absolutely terrified. But if it's just you, then that would be fine. But I think, it's because one-to-one, you've got to make that one-to-one work straight away. Now, you might know the person, which is great, and that's helpful. But if you don't know the person, then, it means you've got to get that interaction going. I mean, you'll have experienced this, Doug, as doing these podcasts, where you meet some people, I'm sure, for the first time, and you're trying to build that sort of that interaction between you, that rapport, if you like, as soon as possible so that they're relaxed and they can be a great guest for your podcast.
That's very, very true. And the thing, when you were saying this, I wrote this down, like, your attitude equals your altitude, so to speak, right? But with 100 people, you can miss a couple of those and you won't really notice it, right? On those interactions. But you have one or two people and you're sitting there and it's not going well. It's like, with 100 people, you can sort of distract and say, well, those two aren't going to interact, but the other 98 are, or whatever it might be. So I do agree. I think larger presentation groups are much easier. There's more of a uniformity to it. And it's impossible or virtually impossible if you have 1,000 people in the audience to, individually connect with each one of them on such a level. But as long as you can connect with the general premise of what everybody's looking for, it's a lot easier. And in the smaller groups, you could do the same thing, but they're going to ask more specific questions. And so I agree with you. Now, I have a question, Trevor. You're in the United Kingdom. I'm in the United States.
Yeah.
All right. Does this work universally across the globe, or is it just for people who speak, English, for example, as their primary language, right? What have you noticed working all over the world?
Well, I think you have to be aware of cultural differences without going into great detail on that, Doug, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end of the day, the true thing is to be your authentic self and not necessarily try and change the way you're going to present or pitch too much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you want to get the pleasantries correct. You want to get the process correct. If you're working with different people, and get some advice on maybe how to do that. If you're not sure how it works, if you're dealing with people in a country you're not familiar with, for example. But nevertheless, it's still that people buy from people bit. And you really want your true self to kind of come across. And interestingly, I had someone on my podcast recently. We haven't put the episode out yet, and he used the term authentic imperfection. So in other words, don't try and be spot on with absolutely everything. Things may not quite go right, but as long as it's the authentic you, that will help engage you to that audience, whether that's one-to-one or one-to-many.
And I think that's awesome, because that can be your intention for coming in. So you got the expectations plus the intention, which equals the attitude you walk in the door with. So if we walk in with that expectation, and then we know what it is, and we walk in with the intention that I'm just going to serve these people, I'm going to be my authentic self, then even if it goes bad, it doesn't matter, because it was supposed to go bad. Right? No one that I know of or have ever heard of selling to someone else when somebody says no, ever had their head explode and that was the end of their life. It was just like, it was just a no. And, you pick up and you move on, right? That type of thing. So I really think that is a key point. Authentic, what do you say? Authentic?
Imperfection.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's gold. Right? Because when we're our authentic selves and we walk in and we know we're doing our authentic selves, it either works out or it doesn't. But the reality is, you're doing what you can do, and you've laid it all out on the mat, and you walk away as friends one way or another.
Yeah. Now, what I would say, of course, is that shouldn't mean that you shouldn't be able to adapt, because it might mean, for example, your pace of delivery might need to be slightly altered depending on your audience.
Correct.
To a degree, the tone of your delivery might be slightly different as well. But that doesn't mean you're not being your authentic self, because in any presentation, ideally, of course, you will want to change your pace. You will want to change your tone. You will want to bring in pauses and ask questions, as you mentioned earlier.
Right.
But it might be that you do those slightly differently depending on your audience. But it's still the authentic you.
I agree. The match and mirror side of this, and cultural differences and understanding those, is very important. I had a client who was born in China, and she used to have a very soft tone. And all the people around her that hired the company, they had a very soft tone. I can come in like this, right? But I adapted to a softer tone, a little bit more mellow Doug, coming in. And the rapport was built instantaneously from doing that. So I think everything you're bringing up are just all awesome points here, Trevor. And I can tell, when I was a professional DJ for many, almost a decade, right? And I got invited to come to a party, and I showed up, and I was the only English speaking person in the room. It was a Chinese 50th anniversary party. And I didn't know, because the last person's name was Baker, who hired me. So I'm assuming, right? So that goes back to the assumption thing. I want to let people know that you can make mistakes like this, right? So I get there and I'm like thinking I'm in the wrong place, because there's no Anglo guy or gal in this place. It's full on Mandarin and Cantonese. That's all they spoke. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to be my authentic self. And I did. And I played with the kids, because they were, a lot of children were there. And my God, they couldn't even speak the language. I couldn't speak their language, but we had the greatest time. We used to get like rating cards, and, it'd be like, 10 is the highest. This was like 10 plus. because I showed up as my authentic self, I made the sale and we got other work out of it on top of this. So point being is that's a presentation too. And everything you're bringing up, Trevor, I think is so important.
Yeah. I think that's a good point as well, is that you never, you have to kind of be ready for a surprise and be able to adapt to it just in case. And of course, if you've kind of got a plan B, well, great. But, you don't want to bog yourself down too much with too many plan Bs, but you need to be ready for that surprise moment.
Agreed. Trevor, I could talk to you all day, as we do all the time every time we get together. Even though a couple of years ago, I remember we had this conversation, we were just on the phone for a long time. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you bringing all these points to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast today. Any parting thoughts or things before we conclude our interview?
No, I would just reiterate, Doug, the two very simple points. If you want to get, you want to improve your win rate or whatever you call it when you're doing pitches and presentations, no matter how high up you are in the company, no matter how long you've been pitching or presenting, put the time into the preparation, which includes the research, and it's well worth practicing a couple of times just to be sure that you've got it right. Thanks, Trevor. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do so? The website that you've mentioned, Doug, trevorleemedia.co.uk is there. It's littered with, book a free 15-minute chat with me on Zoom. So you can just follow that. And it's a very simple process through Calendly to do that. If I mention my own podcast, Better Presentations, More Sales, the one you came on, you were on episode 139, Doug. It's up to 237 now. So, so there's and really the angle there is to try and help people who are delivering pitches or presentations with their skills in that area and their sales skills, combine them together. So as we've discussed today, so they increase their chances of success rather than think, well, 1 in 4 will do. I'll take that. Well, why would you settle for that? Awesome. Well, Trevor, thanks for being here. Very grateful. And until next time. Thank you, Doug. It's been a pleasure. Nice to see you again. Practice, 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 practice. I can't say that enough. Trevor brought this up. Practice, 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 practice. Just because you have a presentation in some capacity, something is working, that's great. Keep it going, right? But you can always innovate just slightly on this and understand more about your client. And I'm not saying deviate off what works. I'm saying make it better. In other words, if you got a presentation today that's converting at, 30%, can we make it convert at 35 or 40 or 50? That's what you want to do with practice, practice, practice. When we're getting involved and we're having so many conversations, sometimes we can just be so confident or overconfident, we forget and we lose our edge. And you'll see this in all types of life. You'll see this in sports and professional dancers. You'll see this in people who are professionally selling. You'll see this in all walks of life, musicians, actors, whatever it might be. It'd be somebody who's just skilled in a trade of, repairing, pick something, lawnmowers or something, right? And they get overconfident in their presentation when they're having conversations. They don't pay attention. They burn their hand. Ow, it hurts, right? So practice, 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 practice. That is really, really, really important. And then come in with the right intention, come in with the right expectation. How do you get that expectation? You get that expectation by coming forth and bringing forth the information that you learned in your research. So never make an exception, because when we assume, sometimes we think people are looking for what we have and we don't ask, then what happens? Well, we miss the mark and your presentation doesn't work as well as it could, right? So there's a lot of rules and things around communication in general, but go back, listen to this over and over again, if you would. Pick out the points that we highlighted throughout this, infuse them into your daily life. You'll have better conversations, better sales presentations, better pitches, and more closes for yourself. Now, if you own a company and you have a sales team, I implore you, have them go through this information as well. Set meetings up, go through that process, practice, 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 as I said, and you will fare better. Now, if you love this content of this particular podcast or any podcast that you want specific content on, and you feel you deserve to have it done, in other words,
you want to have some information on a podcast, just reach out to us. Maybe you're the person who can deliver it. Maybe we must go get another expert to, source and get that information for you. But either way, reach out to us at YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. Let us know. We'll review what you send to us. And if it makes sense or doesn't, we'll respond to you either way and let you know. If you're looking to get yourself to the 1% earners in the world in sales, or maybe somebody you know or your sales team, or you're looking for 1% earners in your company, reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com or Doug Brown 1234, or call the company direct at 603-595-0303. If you like these podcasts, please review it. Give it a 5-star if you feel it deserves. Be very grateful if you did. Also, please tell your friends about this. Tell people that you think could be helped by this particular podcast. I'd be so grateful. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Go out, sell something, sell a lot of it, do it ethically, play win-win, sell it profitably in a high manner, and help somebody win to get to where they want to go. You'll feel better, they'll feel better, and you'll make a lot of money, and they'll be happy they gave it to you. Until next time, to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.